Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Ever wondered what happens when a Zoomer who grew up on the Clone Wars,
a millennial Anakin defender,
and a grumpy old Gen Xer walk into a cantina to talk Star Wars?
Then we've got the podcast for you.
Star Wars Generations is a place for fans of all backgrounds to come together, talk about why we love the franchise, and what we can learn from each other.
With so much new Star Wars content coming out, we take a deep dive into all of it. We talk stories and characters, what we learn about the Force and the Empire, republics old and new, and how each story adds to the larger picture.
Besides episode-by-episode coverage of the new shows, we've been going back to watch the movies in release order. We talk about Star Wars novels and video games, along with fan content and cosplay.
And with each episode, we're just starting the conversation, and we hope you jump in. We'll read your feedback, answer your questions. We've even had full episodes dedicated to questions raised by listeners like you.
You can find us under Star Wars Generations on your favorite podcast app or by going to theethicalpanda.com. May the Force be with you.
Now this is podcasting.
Meet Zinnia.
You are being very polite to someone who is attempting to kill us.
Her wife, Saffron.
You know I'm wildly, madly in love with you.
And their best friend, Goldie.
Glad we didn't miss all the fun.
Swords in hand, they defend their city from the worst of humanity.
I am Lord Buxton Blue.
Equity Electric.
Herr Haig. Virgil Walcott. Vicious Suave.
Follow their adventures on the Swashbuckling Ladies Debate Society audio drama podcast. Available now at truestory.fm/swashbuckling.
I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the next reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Hannibal Rising is over. I thought you would be bigger. I put your face on every bully I've ever hurt.
Is your name Hannibal Lecter? Do you recall the events that led to your family's murder? The little boy Hannibal died out in that snow. He was raised in a work camp.
Let's hear you scream, little master.
What he is now, there's no word for it. Do you have any guilty knowledge of the death of Paul Mormon?
Guilty knowledge? The men who killed my family.
He was killed in the woods where your family died.
His face had been eaten. Now tell me, Inspector, you lost family in the war.
Yes.
Did you catch who did it?
No.
Then we are both suspects.
This movie, Andy, I've been mad about this movie for about 4 weeks.
This is what you get. This is, I guess, penance, we'll just say, for deciding to watch all of the movies from the series in one weekend, and you just plowed through the lot, and you've been sitting on this one for quite a long time. Quite a long time, yeah.
Yeah. I've been simmering on it. Sitting is gentle. Simmering, stewing. What did you... you loved it, right?
Oh, my favorite of the bunch.
Mm-hmm. This is the one I haven't read. I'd never read the book. Hadn't seen the movie. This was the first time. Did not know what to expect. And now I've got it. And it's one of the movies I wish I had not watched. Because it fundamentally breaks so much of what I like about Hannibal Lecter, the character. And I think this movie and the book had the wrong idea around what it purports to do, to unveil and decrypt and decode the origin story of Hannibal Lecter.
Well, I want to talk about that a little bit because you enjoy the book Hannibal quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And as memory serves, that book is where he started introducing more of Hannibal's backstory, as far as his youth, his survival with his sister, and the people who ate her, and kind of introduced him to the fantastic world of cannibalism and all that
Spoiler
fun stuff. It's that's kind of, it had already been set up. Let's just say
yes.
So had he already overstepped by creating all of that in that story before he even got to this story?
Yeah, no, so here's the issue. In this story, I actually think the opening bit of Misha is probably okay, right? It had it been a prologue in another movie, maybe it would have been fine, right? The fact that we expanded it to this sort of more of a wholehearted revenge story is where things go wrong. I did not object as much to the book stuff in Hannibal because so much more of Hannibal was in Florence, right? It gave me, I think he skirted the right balance with a lot of those elements. I think this movie, I think breaks that trust in the sort of careful balance. I wrote my review and I called it like a careful detente between the past and our present and what we know of this character, because the character to me is the Joker. It is this character where evil exists as something to respond to. Like everything that I've learned about the character so far is that he exists because of nature, because that's who he is. And what this movie sets out to do is say, and the story sets out to do is, he exists because of nurture. He was taught to be this. And I think where the book gets it better, the tone of the book, at least my read on it, is that he responded the way he did to Misha because that's who he was in the first place. And what this movie depicts is he was trained, he was nurtured to be this character. And also the mask.
Don't get me started on the mask.
Was it too soon?
We'll have to talk about it.
There's a whole segment coming about the mask.
I think that's a big part of it is, okay, so it's an interesting progression of the Hannibal Lecter character that we've had, right? From Manhunter, where he is, I would say, the smallest percent starring Hannibal Lecter in a film. And because of that also ends up being much more mysterious and plotting and straightforward. Like there is a nice element to the way that we end up having Lecter as performed by Brian Cox in Manhunter. And then we jump into the Anthony Hopkins trilogy, essentially, where we kind of get to see him tackling all of the different stories. In Silence of the Lambs, he's a creepy character. He's very scary. He's a killer. We see him, take down several cops and, do some gruesome things as far as like putting one person's face onto his own so that he can escape. Like, he is legit scary in Silence of the Lambs, but there is this compelling draw to him in the way that he is drawn to Clarice Starling. And we're getting this sense that, okay, there is definitely a dark character here, but I'm drawn to him because he's a fascinating personality. And the way that Clarice ends up kind of playing those games with him come together to kind of craft a magnificent story. Then I think, my complaints about Hannibal is it felt like Thomas Harris latched onto the wrong ideas of the success of Silence of the Lambs and decided, let's make it a Clarice and Hannibal romance film as they kind of come together and go off and end up together essentially by the end of the film. Yes, we get Hannibal trying to survive on his own in disguise in Florence, and that's a great part of the story. We also get this revenge plot by Mason Verger, who had been one of Hannibal's patients, convinced to kind of cut his own face off, and now is after Lecter for revenge. So there's this revenge story on Lecter, and this is the one where I think Anthony Hopkins started recognizing that he's the protagonist of the book, of the film, and audiences are no longer seeing him as a cannibalistic serial killer, a villain, but they're seeing him as a dark anti-hero. Like, that's essentially what we get in that story.
Sympathetic.
And he's sympathetic. We like this guy, and we like that he's eating Ray Liotta's character's brains. It's a strange twist on this character, and Anthony Hopkins recognized that and rightfully wanted to make the character darker again when he had his chance to do the remake Red Dragon. And so we get a little bit of a darker version of Lecter. Again, there's not much of him in that story, but I would say at least he didn't feel as sympathetic, I mean, he still is very congenial and has all those far too many conversations with Will Graham over the course of the story, but it does feel like, okay, I mean, I think the beginning of it definitely kind of paints that picture. This is a guy who is a fan of the orchestra, doesn't like the fact that the flautist keeps flubbing his notes, and kills him and then feeds him to the board. Apparently not the first time that he's done this with his victims, where he feeds human remains to, like, his meal made up of these people to the board when they come over for this big dinner that he has. And you're getting a sense, okay, this is a dark, messed up character. And then we'll talk about the reasons that Harris decided to tell this story, but he decides, let's go back to his childhood and explore some of the elements that I added in Hannibal. And yeah, he gives us this sympathetic character who all of the sense of him being an actual serial killer, somebody who not just is killing people, but also cooking them and eating them. Like, we're getting this backstory of him that makes him like somebody that they're rooting for. And it just like, is this the right direction to be taking with this character? I mean, I'm all for backstories of killers and everything, but it just I don't feel like the story that he ended up crafting is the right one. It just feels like, why is this the version of Hannibal Lecter that we're getting? Because now it's like you have to rethink all of those things. It's like, well, yeah, but he was somebody who was, his life was ruined, and, psychologically he's been tormented by the Nazis and everything. And you get this story and it's like, oh, okay, wait a minute. Wait, am I rooting for him now? It's a mess.
It is a mess. It's a complete mess. And I think that's the act of making him sympathetic just made him, a superhero, a vigilante, right? He's a vigilante. He's doing stuff that the authorities won't or can't. But the authorities are like the Nazis.
Well, not once he gets to Paris, like that.
Yeah, not once he gets to Paris. Yeah, that's very, very true. But the fact that he is stepping in where authorities can't, making his sociopathy something to celebrate, it just completely breaks what this character was all about. And I do think that's objective. I don't think that's just me liking earlier Hannibal, right? I think this character was broken in this movie, and why, the TV show ends up being rehabilitative for the character, I think, but I haven't watched enough of it to know, do we have the same kind of sympathies with that Hannibal as we do here? Here, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. We're rooting for the good guy.
Yeah, and they do try to paint elements of the story to make people recognize, oh, he shouldn't be doing these things. Like Lady Murasaki is seeing things in him that she's like, oh, well, okay, he's killing these people. I kind of am supporting it because of things that they've done to our family, but I'm also recognizing that you're going too far,
yeah,
we're seeing that, but it's never portrayed completely as a problem. And that's a big problem.
Name the Avengers, the Marvel Avengers who do this kind of stuff, right? We're already celebrating Deadpool and Daredevil, and these are These are vengeance characters that we have in the MCU. That's what Hannibal is sort of it takes as kind of a tonal reference to me. Like, we're creating a superhero.
Yeah. That seems to be what they're going for. And, to the point where we get some strange character. Some of it is the worst part of prequels, and that is giving us the setups for, this was where Hannibal learned to cook so well. These sorts of things that you always have to get in prequels. It's, and they're such eye-rolling things, like watching Han get the dice for the Millennium Falcon, like things like that. You're like, ugh, you don't need to show that for me to understand that I'm seeing the earlier part of this story. And we're getting that with all of this with Hannibal, right? Like, his medical training, his weirdly his swordplay, which I guess was something that we never have seen in any of the films, but now we know, aside from everything else, he's also a master swordsman. I guess that's why he's so good with the knife. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's another element that we get all of the setup, the required setup for his character beats throughout the film. And I guess that goes to, and we just have to get it out of the way, the ridiculousness of the mask, as if that is a character element in Hannibal that is a requirement for who he is. Because we have this, his uncle had married Lady Murasaki, and his uncle is also deceased. In the house, there's a samurai warrior outfit, along with all sorts of these interesting different Japanese masks and everything, one of which weirdly looks like the mask that Hannibal had put on his face a number of times in Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon. I don't think he wears one in Hannibal, unless I'm forgetting. Maybe he does when Mason Verger has caught him. Anyway, It's a thing that they've decided, well, we've got to put Hannibal in a mask because it's creepy and the fans love it. And so here we get him putting on this mask that is just like a samurai sort of mask, but it also happens to be designed in the what we know as kind of the Lecter style. It's so ridiculous.
It's a prop with a god complex, right? Like, it's just like the prop. This should have been called Hannibal Rising: The Story of the Mask. Like, there's just it's a movie that wants us to care so much about the mask, which ultimately, and I wonder if anybody would think, in making this movie, in writing the story, it'll be a wonderful coincidence. It's going to be a coincidence because, that's the style of the masks that were worn. And, I know because I play a lot of Assassin's Creed Shadow, and that's what they wear. And it's a level up kind of a bit that you can get. And I wonder if at any point people thought, like, maybe we can get away with this because we have, Murasaki in here, and it's going to be a cultural tie-in. And won't that be interesting? Because this is his superhero. He's a superhero, and superheroes, a lot of them do wear masks. I wonder, this is me being as generous as I possibly can. And then I have to turn around and slap myself in the face, because the whole thing that makes Hannibal terrifying is that when he is at his worst, he's not wearing a mask. There is no ideological purpose for him to wear a mask at all in this movie. The terror that comes from him is because he is unafraid to do the worst things without obscuring his identity at all. And this movie breaks that too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The idea of this element that they're trying to create that then they never use again. It's only there just so we have the chance to see it. And it was like, that's not only are you going to introduce it as if it's some core element of Hannibal's being, but then you're going to just completely disregard its use and it's going to disappear from the film for the rest of the time. It made no sense. It was so dumb.
Some of it is the danger of the prequel. Like, if this were the first movie, right? If we just erase all of Hannibal Lecter history and we start with Hannibal Rising, and it's the story of this kid who becomes a serial killer because of vengeance and trauma and all of the things that he's he's dealing with as a child, his the like war trauma and survivor guilt, and he ate his own sister, and then he had the mask, and we were first introduced to the mask by way of Lady Murasaki, and then we get to Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, where the mask comes back. Would we have been more gracious?
I don't know if we could have been more gracious for those elements. Like, it would have been hard no matter how you slice it. I have a hard time seeing how you could be more gracious with it, just because of the fact that it exists. And every time it's always been portrayed has always been as a tool that law enforcement uses to protect themselves from somebody who eats people.
Right. Punitively.
Yeah. It's punishment. You put him in this so that he can't get you. And yet here, suddenly, it's now shifted, and now it's like, nope, not in this film. In this film, it's a tool that he's going to wear because it looks cool. Like, it really makes no sense. It's like the most illogical element of this story, which has a lot of problems.
It is the most illogical element of the story.
Yeah, and this definitely was a period. I'm just trying to think like metatextual as far as why this film and the book, which, were basically kind of created at the same time. And we didn't even mention Thomas Harris wrote the screenplay for this. It was this period post 9/11 where if you look at stories, there's an increased focus on trauma, psychological scars, loss, violence. Like, you have a lot of these different types of stories that are becoming popular. And it also is the rise of origin stories. Like, we're seeing, like, going back to things, even like completely not horror, but like Batman Begins, Casino Royale, both came out right around this time. Anti-heroes were on the rise. Walter White and Dexter both were examples in TV who people were really enjoying. And also, I think in horror films, you were seeing a lot more backstory development. And so with all of these things, you can see why De Laurentiis and Thomas Harris kind of felt like they needed to give this big character more story. They had to figure out, like, what else can we do to expand this story so that audiences get a better handle on who he is. And I gotta say, like, I just don't think that Thomas Harris was able to come up with something. And I think I don't know, for me, I don't think he was able to come up with something that worked. And I think a lot of that for me is the reasons that he came to actually write this story.
Yeah, right. Because there's a hostage situation.
It was absolutely a hostage situation. Yeah, I mean, De Laurentiis, he and his company had the rights to the Lecter character for films. That was really the issue. They gave up their rights willingly for Silence of the Lambs because Manhunter was such a flop. And then after Silence of the Lambs was such a hit, they were like, oh, we're going to just keep doing more of this stuff. And yeah, so he was like, we're going to make another Hannibal movie. And Harris was like, I don't have another thing to do. And he told him in no uncertain terms that we're doing it. And basically, you need to come up with it or I'm going to get somebody else to do it instead because I have the rights. And that's the thing I think that's so frustrating. Like, I'm trying to find his actual words. He said, I say to Thomas, if you don't do the prequel, I will do it with someone else. I don't want to lose the franchise, and the audiences want it. He said, no, I'm sorry. And I said, I will do it with somebody else. And he said, let me think about it. I will come up with an idea. And Harris, actually, he said he did have continuation rights to the character and could have done whatever he wanted to. He had a lot of enthusiasm for a movie, and it was contagious, I suppose. And that's why he did this.
Mm-hmm.
They pushed and pushed and pushed, and they said, we're going to do a prequel with or without you. And so he said, okay, fine, let's do it. And yeah, I mean, I guess he got paid to get it done, but at what cost, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how the movie is an interpretation of the cycle of violence, and I think the script itself is an interpretation of the cycle of intellectual violence that is on parade in Hollywood. And I think this is the movie where Hannibal Lecter is deflated to nonsense, which is too bad.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. What do you think of the director? Do you know much about Peter Weber, who was hired to direct this film?
Are you a Weberhead?
Webhead, Pete. Webhead.
Webhead. Oh, wow. That was like right there.
I know, it's right there.
Do you know, I saw The Girl with the Pearl Earring.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, right. What happened? I think that's it. I think that's the only movie that I've seen. Is that what else has Weber done?
His small filmography. He's made 7 films from 2001 to 2019, and I've only seen Girl with the Pearl Earring, which is the one he did right before this one, which I have now unfortunately also seen. He has done some TV, not a lot of stuff. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what he's up to these days, but looks like an interesting filmmaker who certainly is drawn to like kind of documentary work and stuff now. So
I can't fathom how we got from The Girl with the Pearl Earring to Hannibal Rising. I think my hunch is the intention was we're going to create something with a sort of narrative grandiosity of Pearl Earring in Hannibal, and it's going to be elegant and it's going to be powerful, and it ended up being something that he wanted to do differently than that. He wanted to change, and so we didn't get the stuff that we enjoyed about the previous film, and I think that's too bad. This is where the IP doesn't align with the tonal direction.
No, it just feels like such a shift, and I don't know if they just went with it because Girl with the Pearl Earring was good, and I don't know. To me, it seems like the sort of situation where the producers hire an up and coming director who's made a good low budget film that has gotten some attention, and they hire them to bring them on board to direct something that's much bigger with a much bigger budget, but in a way where they also know that the producers, can pretty much control them. It's the Marvel model. It's you name it, any of these big franchises, that's how they so often do this. They bring these people on who they know that they can essentially control. And so the producers can really kind of manage and get the film that they want. That feels like, sadly, the case here.
And that's how we end up with an opening brooding origin myth, right? And the end is a revenge film, and those tones don't interact well together. Once we hit action thriller territory, it feels so weirdly out of context from the little that I know about Peter Weber's choices. And there were still something. I mean, he's going for this sort of bigness, sort of operatic bigness, largesse in this movie, and I think he does well with use of sound and silence, and he does well when he's going for some weighty moments, and yet it's just overall, like when you add all the stuff up, it's a melodrama. It ends up being, a telenovela.
I mean, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, clearly it's a director who is trying his hand at I think a lot of these situations, these young directors are brought into these situations probably going, ugh, is this what I have to do? Well, I'm going to just do the best I can with it and hope that some people recognize that I was trying to do something a little bigger, a little more grand with it. And I mean, it has its moments, the look, the tone, the style. I mean, there are things in here that I think are interesting.
I'll tell you, as a standout bit, we have when Hannibal's doing his surgical training and we get the transitions back and forth between, memories of violence. And I thought that was a really cool exercise in his story to move things forward and remind us where he's been. Like, it was just edited really well, editor the Valeria Bonelli. Some of those things from a straight up kind of cinematic perspective hit me just right.
Yeah, and I think that there are elements. I mean, you're shooting over in the area around Prague, and you're able to kind of capture some real beautiful countryside and some just nature and the forests and everything. Like, there are some really stunning shots that we end up capturing through here. Like the sequence when he captures one of the men who had been involved, when there were soldiers who had held him and his sister hostage and ended up eating his sister. He's holding him like out in the forest is where he takes him with a rope and everything like that. It's beautifully shot. Like that scene is well crafted, well put together. Like I like the way that it all plays out. Like we're getting that. Like there's nothing at fault with the production style of this film. I think that's something that you really see. I definitely remember that with Girl with the Pearl Earring is Weber crafted a sense of creating that world where I felt it was real authentic. You could feel kind of the dirt in that period of, I can't remember the story, 1300s or whenever it was. Like you really feel that. And you could feel that here where you're getting a sense of the time and place. It's just the story that he's stuck with having to tell that Thomas Harris wrote. And I think that's the difficulty.
Yeah. Just a last comment on, and maybe this goes to, our dear Gaspard Ulliel, R.I.P., the performance. I think one of the things that gets lost here is we get to see how Hannibal turns into a monster by way of training. But we don't really get to see as clearly his intellectual development, I think, in a way that makes him sophisticated beyond his years. He just is that already. And I almost wonder if that's where the movie and the story could have spent more time, and maybe the book does, I don't know, spent more time, showing us his growth as a human being and less time on the revenge story. Like I'd be more interested in his psychological development than this movie seemed interested in telling me.
Yeah, I don't think that it was interested in exploring much more. And you bring up a point that I wanted to just emphasize, just as far as like, as far as we're talking about Hannibal and this story about this serial killer as he's learning his craft, learning his trade, starting to figure out, I'm going to eat the rude, like when he goes after the guy who offends his aunt. And I'm just like, okay, we're getting all of this set up. But it also plays in exactly the worst way to the trope of this type of story. It's like, okay, he's a bad guy, but there has to be a worse guy. And so you've got these, I don't know, I guess they were also like Lithuanian soldiers who switched sides to work with the Nazis so that they could make more money, and they became thieves and all this stuff. But then when we get to them later in life, it turns out, okay, they really are worse guys, because as it turns out, you have Rhys Ifans' Brutus character, who's, I don't know, is like he's kidnapping women and creating like a canal brothels. Is that what he's doing? I couldn't quite figure out what he's doing, but it seemed like that's essentially the crux of it. And I'm like, okay, so they're basically making him the worst because he's kidnapping people and using these women as prostitutes.
That's exactly. And I think what's interesting about when you look at Hannibal in the prior movies, he was bad. And also there was another bad. Like one of the cognitive challenges that you have as an audience member is trying to wrestle with, like, oh my God, these guys are on the same level. Like they're both doing horrible things. And the difference between Hannibal and the other is this whole story of transformation. I'm going to turn into a butterfly. I'm going to turn into a dragon. I'm going to turn into a beautiful, beautiful thing. And this movie, I'm coming to this right now, like what a missed opportunity to show Hannibal going through that exact transformation. Like as a sociopath, what is his metamorphosis story? And this movie is so practical in its approach to bad thing equals revenge that I don't think we get any sense of Hannibal's transformation himself. And wouldn't that have been an interesting prequel to see his story and then be able to map it in hindsight, with the benefit of hindsight, on these other stories to demonstrate why he's so good at talking about Buffalo Bill and the Tooth Fairy? Like, because he was that guy. That's what this story should have been, and we don't have any of it.
Yeah, like, have him get Brutus on the couch.
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. talk about your issues.
Yeah.
Right. There's something more that could have been done there, that just take the revenge out of it or find a better way to go about it. So it really kind of portrays the dark side of Lecter, because we just don't really get the dark side other than that he's angry and he's going to take revenge no matter what. Even though even Lady Murasaki is like, don't do it. Like, she's seen what he can do. She's seen the results of him killing the butcher. And she's helped him. She took the butcher's head and put it on the pike just so that Lecter could be freed. Like, she's become part of the crimes, essentially. But she's also said, just tell the cop. Just let him know so that you don't have to go through all this. And he's just like, I can't. I have to kill.
The first thing that you texted me, I was actually... I knew when you watched the movie because you texted me right away. And I was waiting for the text, and I was kind of in my head gaming, what is the first thing Andy's going to say? And what you said was not what I expected.
Okay.
It was, what is Gong Li doing in this movie?
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask, did you figure it out?
Money. She needs money. I don't think she has the stunt woman background that Michelle Yeoh has, and so I think it's been harder for Gong Li to make a presence in Hollywood. Unfortunately, I think that she's stunning. We have talked about her in a number of films, notably when we did our series on Zhang Yimou and his films and everything. But largely, she just has not done much. She hasn't had as many opportunities, I should say, over here. And here's an example where, as a Chinese woman, for the second time, she is playing a Japanese woman, this, after Memoirs of a Geisha. But I mean, okay, so starting with Memoirs of a Geisha in 2005, then Miami Vice, then she goes back and she does another film with Zhang Yimou, and then she does this. And then I think pretty much moving forward until she got to 2020 Mulan, I think largely she had been just specifically focusing on movies back in Hong Kong and China. So I just feel like as essentially the end of a try at Hollywood, I think that she tried it and was like, I'm not getting anything good. I'm just going to go back and do stuff back over in my home country. It's embarrassing to see her in this movie, to the point where I finished it and I'm like, I have to watch a good Gong Li movie. And I immediately put on Raise the Red Lantern because it was just...
I saw that. You needed a palate cleanser.
I felt so bad. I'm like, Gong, you need better people working as your American agents.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, did you know what you were getting into? Were you a celebrated fan of Hannibal, the character? Like, did you get it?
I have to think that this is one of those movies that likely is developing a following now on streaming and home video, and likely is something that at least is going to be helping, throw money at all the different people who are in it. Rhys Ifans, Dominic West. I like to think that they're all still going to be getting checks from this at least.
It's such a funny character because, it's like she adds this level of class to the movie, that I don't know, emotional texture, and the script doesn't support that at all. It's there. It's not present. Instead, we get this really ambiguous chemistry, right? That is familial and sort of romantic, clearly. I guess that makes you squirm in your seat, but beyond that kind of discomfort, I wasn't sure what the entire familial relationship added to the movie. Like, why was she where she was? I don't feel like the movie ever sold that.
Yeah, it was a strange choice, especially because I shouldn't complain about this, because in the scope of prequels feeling forced to set all of these key elements up with your characters, again, there's nothing that we have ever seen in Lecter as far as a background in swordsmanship or anything related to samurai culture, anything like that. Like, it's just not part of the nature of who we've ever seen. And so it just made me wonder, it's like, am I upset that they're not giving me something in his background that makes more sense as far as where we see him now? even though that would essentially be playing into all of those prequel tropes that I hate so much. So I don't know. I feel torn on it. I just feel like it didn't work. It left me wondering, and maybe it's just because I like Gong Li so much. It was frustrating to see her in this. But I couldn't figure out why they went this route. And it was just a strange route to explore.
Where do you stand on we got Ben Davis behind the camera. Where do you stand on the look of the film in general?
Well, like I've said, I think that the look, the tone, the music, like everything works so much better than the story. Like I think that Weber clearly had a team of people that he worked with here that crafted something that looked good. I mean, it's again, it helps that it's shot in a beautiful place, but I think that it's a nice looking film. And, I think Davis is one of those cinematographers. This is pretty early in his career, but has gone on to do a lot of big projects, and I think captures them really well. And I enjoy what he's doing here.
He does some interesting things. These choices to keep coming back to Hannibal's eyes, right? There's a lot of close-up time dedicated to looking at Gaspard's eyes, to the extent that you get something out of the depth of this character and the psychological distance that exists in the terror chasm in his head, right? I think that's one of the things that this shot goes to over and over again. And I think I think when we have him with Murasaki, the lighting is just fantastic. Like they make some really interesting choices for the visual aesthetic of a lot of their sequences together that I think really works well. Generally, it's a pretty practiced standard kind of, you don't have a lot of freehand shots. There are a lot of slow dollies and not a lot going on that puts us at sort of risk of jarring us. There's not a lot of risky stuff going on with the camera, but some of these elements are really quite beautiful.
Yeah, no, very true. You mentioned the looks of like with Hannibal's eyes and everything, and you mentioned Gaspard Ulliel, but I mean, considering this is kind of the Hannibal Lecter series, I think we owe it to talk a little bit more about him and as far as what he's bringing to the table as our protagonist. Primarily, we also have a young Hannibal Lecter. Aaron Thomas plays him, but I mean, what do you think of Gaspard? Is there anything that he's bringing to the character that you can say, I can see this as the kid who would grow into either Brian Cox or Anthony Hopkins?
At no point was I able to say that. I found this to be a completely different guy. I was not able to make the connection. And that's not to say that Gaspard's performance was necessarily bad. I mean, I blame that stuff on the story and the script. I think he did a fine job for what he was given. I do not think he was right for the part. I don't think he looked right for the part. I was never able to chart in my head that this guy as a young man would ever start to look like Brian Cox or Anthony Hopkins. And Brian Cox and Anthony Hopkins both cut a similar frame, a similar look to one another, right? There was some intentionality behind how they produced Anthony Hopkins after Brian Cox. They look alike, right? They look alike. They have a similar sort of structure, and I just didn't see that in Gaspard. Not at all.
I agree with that element of it. I don't think that they cast somebody who ever could have looked like he was growing into either of those characters. And I think that was a struggle I had as well. Like I had a hard time buying that this was going to be the guy who would become, one of them. It bugged me. It didn't bug me too much, but I couldn't help but feel like they were just trying to cast somebody who had just an intense look. I'm like, is that the right reason to cast Ulliel? It's like, I think he's a very compelling actor. And actually, I enjoy moments in his performance, not because of, what he's bringing to the character or anything like that. But I'm like, I think he's a good actor. And I enjoyed what he was able to kind of craft here. I just think that, yeah, to your point, I just don't know if he was necessarily the right person for the role. It's a tough role to cast. I don't know who they who they would cast otherwise. Apparently, Hugh Dancy, Macaulay Culkin, Dominic Cooper, Tom Payne were all different people who auditioned for the role.
I could see Kieran Culkin doing it. I could see Kieran Culkin's face turn into Hopkins. That I could buy.
Yeah, but when it comes to what Ulil is doing is like, I think that he's doing what he can with the script that he is given. And that's kind of the hard part of a role like this. And so I feel bad for the guy. And yeah, you mentioned, he tragically died after a ski accident at just 37 years old. So just a couple years ago. So very sad. But I've seen him in a few other films. I would need to go back and look at them again to recognize his part in those films, because I know I've seen them. I just can't remember him in them. But I found him to be compelling enough.
Yeah, I think so. And I think he was obviously, it's a tragic accident taken too soon. He was in Moon Knight. That's the most recent thing I've seen him in. He was in an episode of Moon Knight, and I very, very much like that show. So I just feel like it was a miss for this property.
Yeah. And Dominic West, he's our other, Dominic West and Rhys Ifans. I don't know. Do you have any much to say about either of them? Our inspector and then the head of the band that ate Misha.
Did you buy Dominic West?
Yeah, I think he's fine as our detective here trying to figure things out. It wasn't a complex or complicated role. I didn't have issues with him. I thought he was fine. I just, all my issues really revolve around the story here.
Yeah. I think Dominic West is one of the great sort of utility players in the business. Like, he just comes in and he can be the gruff investigator. He can be the divorcing husband. He can be the cuckold. He can be just about anything. And so, I think he was fine. But I'm with you. The problem with this movie is not with any of the individual performances.
No.
We didn't mention Kevin McKidd. Anytime we get a Kevin McKidd reference, I have to do a special shout out, Kevin McKidd.
That's funny because my wife was also like, "Why is Kevin McKidd in this movie?" Like, of all the people to call out, it's the same thing. Yeah. That's very funny.
It's really funny. It's weird. It's so weird.
Yeah, I think we last talked about him on T2 Trainspotting.
That's right. He's great. Wish he was in a better movie.
Yes, me too. I just, to the point where I just have to, in this franchise, which we have brought this up more often than not about endings that feel completely tacked on. Like, since Silence of the Lambs, they've all had an ending that, for one reason or another, people have complained about. This film ends with, so Hannibal escapes from the flames of this houseboat that he is blown up in the canal. And then we get this final scene of him hunting down the last member of this group who has moved to Canada and is running like a little convenience store, basically. And the guy comes into the room, and that's kind of it. And then he sees Hannibal, and then it cuts to Hannibal driving away, and that's the end of the movie. It was so anticlimactic to the point where I'm like, why did we even need this? All it's there for is just simply plot, just to show he actually does go over there. But I'm like, there's nothing intriguing that happens. It's the most flat way to kind of give us an ending. And I've had issues with a lot of the endings, notably in Hannibal when Red Dragon, when they felt required to set up that ending, setting up that Clarice was coming to show up now and talk to Hannibal. This one just felt like it was the most boring way that they could have crafted an ending to this story.
What they should have done is have him not in Canada. They'd have to be in the United States, probably somewhere in Maryland. And he's obviously no longer a Nazi traitor. He's now a school teacher, and he's teaching an 8th grade class. And it's a complete context shock, because why are we now in an 8th grade class? And the camera does a tracking shot, and it stops as a little girl raises her hand, and you just hear the former Nazi say, "Clarice," cut to black.
Oh my gosh.
Really? Like, that's the tie-in you would have wanted all along.
They're just, you think that it couldn't get any worse, and then Pete comes up with it. Pete comes up with it. There it is, right there.
Pete's got it. Pete just nailed it.
Yeah. Well, it's a frustrating way to end this franchise for sure, because I feel like, I mean, there's definitely highs and lows over the course of it, but by the time we get here, I'm just like, yeah, they've really kind of hit bottom with
They sure have. Yeah.
with what they could have done. And I feel like it boils down to Thomas Harris being stuck in a situation where he's like, they're going to take it away from me and I better just suck it up and come up with something. And he did. And it's just like, it's very frustrating that this is what they chose to do.
This is actually going to become the anchor film for a series we need to do next year. And it's a series of films that were all written by writers under duress.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he's the only one who has fallen to this particular predicament.
Probably not. I'm sure not. Yeah.
So frustrating.
I'm trying to think, what other elements did they show that were tropes of Lecter as far as his backstory? I feel like there's dogs. We have him. He's great at angry dogs. He knows how to take care of angry dogs. Also, the lie detector test. He's so cool and collected that he can keep his pulse exactly where it needs to be and never make a budge on a lie detector test.
I actually, thankfully, went into my Hannibal Lecter tropes on tvtropes.com. Let's just see what they have to say.
Oh, perfect.
In Hannibal Rising, animal lover, antagonist title, averted as Vladis Grutas is the villain. A-hole victim. Hannibal's first kill, Paul Momond, is a foul-mouthed Vichy collaborator who insulted Hannibal's Japanese aunt with racist epithets. Atonement detective. In contrast to the unrepentant collaborator above, Inspector Popeil regards it as my greatest failure that he initially kept the peace for the Vichy government before seeing the camp trains and defecting to the resistance. Big brother instinct. Breaking speech. Trope was used in the trope namer Hannibal himself by Vladis Grutas. He claimed that Hannibal is not looking for revenge, but making sure that the men that participated in Misha's murder wouldn't tell the world that Hannibal ate her too. Oof. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot. Co-dragons, cool uncle, it just goes on and on. We got them all.
So many things.
Oh, here's a good one. Death by racism. Hannibal's first victim is an Asian-hating racist.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I guess that's everything, huh?
Yeah. I'm not going to revisit this movie.
No, I certainly hope to never think about it again. Well, we'll be right back, but first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Romeo, Ian Post, featuring Sivan Talmor, Gilad Banamram, Oriol Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. They told me not to look back. They said, let your past die. But I had reviews to log. I was just a boy when it happened. I watched them. 5 stars for a movie that barely earned 2. And then that changed me. So I went looking for the ones responsible, the tastemakers, the cinephiles, the ones who put Morbius on a best of list unironically. And that's when I found it. Letterboxd. A refuge. A journal. A database. A perfectly alphabetized, genre-sorted custom list. Enabled oasis where I could keep track of everything I watched. And more importantly, where I could tell the world why I hated it. And now you can join me. And you can save 20% when you go pro with Letterboxd. That's right. Whether you're signing up or renewing your sacred subscription, just go to thenextreel.com/letterboxd or use the code NEXTREEL at checkout. Because some people just watch movies, but we remember. How did it do at award season, Andy?
About as well as you would expect. It was nominated for 2, and they were both Razzies. We love the Razzies. That's right. It was nominated for Worst Prequel or Sequel, but lost to the film Daddy Day Camp. And it was nominated for Worst Excuse for a Horror Movie, but lost to I Know Who Killed Me.
Okay. Well, I don't normally like what the Razzies do, but in this case, I do think it is probably well earned. If you're going to have an award like the Razzies, this is a movie for it. Let's just say that.
There you go. There you go.
How did it do at the box office? Did it make any money at all?
Well, for Weber's prequel, he had a budget of $75 million, or $114.7 million in today's dollars. The movie returned to the Valentine's Day period, opening February 9th, 2007, opposite Norbit, Daddy's Little Girls, and music and lyrics. Talking about a weekend of fun-filled entertainment.
Jiminy.
This landed in the number 2 spot behind Norbit. That's right. And it would fall out of the top 10 by its 3rd week. It would go on to earn $27.7 million domestically and $54.5 million internationally for a total gross of $125.7 million in today's dollars. That lands the film with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $90.6 thousand. It still turned a profit, but was the weakest of the bunch post Silence of the Lambs.
I'm surprised at that. I guess I'm not surprised at that. I mean, it's a Hannibal Lecter movie. Everybody is going to go see it, and they're only going to see it once, and they're not going to tell anybody about it, and then it dies.
Well, and I think the reason that we haven't seen another one, because based on the way that De Laurentiis was talking to Harris, like he wanted to keep making Hannibal as long as it was going to make money. But I think the profit margin was so slim on this one, and who knows, after prints and advertising, it might not have actually even turned a profit, that it kind of crossed that line finally. Because, generally it's like you have a rise with the first few films, and then it just is a slow decline. And once it crosses that line, it's just no longer profitable to keep making anymore. And I think that's why we haven't seen it anymore. And, why it's probably shifted to TV, and certainly one that I need to check out now because I hear it's worth it.
Really good things. Yeah. All right.
Well, this was a rough way to finish it, but we've had some good movies in this series, so we'll have those to hold on to, I guess.
We'll always have those.
Well, yeah. All right, well, we'll be right back for our ratings, but first, here's the trailer for next week's movie. Returning to the land of Samaria, it's Richard Fleischer's follow-up to Conan the Barbarian. It's Conan the Destroyer from 1984.
In an age when only the strongest survived, and only the ruthless triumphed, only one name became a legend. Conan the Destroyer. In his first adventure, he fought alone.
It is written that a woman child must make a perilous journey. I want you to take her on that journey.
Now, he joins a wizard.
What are they going to do?
Have lunch.
A warrior.
There are 6 of them against her.
1, 2, 3. A renegade.
I think you're right.
And a princess. Together, they are sent by a treacherous queen across the lands of hostile kingdoms to solve the mystery of an ancient race and seek the power of a phantom city.
You're afraid of magic?
When it comes from evil.
This will.
Come anyway.
The Horn of Dagoth, destroyer of worlds.
The god will live again.
Enough talk! If they cannot seize the horn in time, the world will be plunged into eternal darkness. Grace Jones, Wilt Chamberlain, Mako, Sarah Douglas, and Arnold Schwarzenegger as Conan the Destroyer. The all-new adventures of the most powerful legend of them all.
Well, well, my friends, it seems that even I, Hannibal Lecter, am not immune to the allure of a good origin story. Hannibal Rising, the film that dares to unravel the mystery of my past, to offer a glimpse into the events that shaped me into the man I am today. I must admit it's a rather peculiar feeling, watching one's life play out on the silver screen, to see a young actor portray me as a tragic hero, a man driven by the noble pursuit of revenge against those who wronged my family. It's almost enough to make me forget about the whole cannibalistic serial killer thing. But let's be honest, my friends, we all know how this story ends. No matter how much the filmmakers try to make you sympathize with my character, the fact remains that I go on to become one of cinema's most notorious villains. It's a bit like trying to make a heartwarming tale about the childhood of Darth Vader. Sure, it might be interesting, but we all know he's going to end up blowing up planets and choking people with his mind. And yet I can't help but appreciate the irony of it all. Here I am, a fictional character, offering my thoughts on a film that attempts to humanize me. It's a bit like a snake critiquing a documentary about its own venom. But fear not, my fellow cinephiles. The next reel has a veritable feast of films far more deserving of your time and attention. From the masterful storytelling of the Godfather trilogy to the pulse-pounding thrills of The Silence of the Lambs, the hosts have dissected and discussed a wide array of cinematic delights, each one a gourmet meal for the mind and the senses. And as a member of the Next Reel community, you will have access to even more tantalizing content. Monthly bonus episodes, extra insights woven into each regular episode, and the delightful convenience of early, ad-free access. All for just $5 a month, or $55 for a whole year. Visit truestory.fm/join and embark upon a journey of discovery, where the only thing you have to fear is running out of fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Letterboxd, Andy. This is it. This is the make or break Letterboxd week. You have to do a full accounting.
Okay, so I'll do my accounting. So Manhunter, I gave 4 stars. Silence of the Lambs, I gave 5 stars. Hannibal, I gave 1 star. And then Red Dragon, I gave 3 stars. So that puts me at a total so far of 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 stars.
God, I hope you don't. I hope to God you don't get to 15.
I'll tell you, I'm not hitting 15. I know you had this thing about, an average of 3 stars per film equaling 15 total for this series. And you're at 14 right now, right?
Yeah. I feel like I did not go into this planning my star numbers. I just had a feeling that I could hit it. I just had a hunch.
Exactly hit it.
And I did. Hannibal Rising is a 1-star movie. And that means my 4-star Manhunter, my 3-star Red Dragon, my 5-star Silence of the Lambs, my 2-star Hannibal, and now my 1-star No Heart, Hannibal Rising. And I'm there.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I sit. 1-star No Heart with this one. It was a rough watch. This and Hannibal both were quite disappointing in this. Yeah, it was very frustrating. It had its moments, but none of them were anything good that could have gotten it above 1 star.
It had its moments. None of them were good.
Well, I mean, none of them were good enough
Put
to
it on
bump
a
it
poster.
over 1 star. Yeah. Oh, it's a rough one. It was a rough one. Well, you'll find that over on our Letterboxd account, which is at the next reel. That's 1-star No Heart. And you can find me there at Soda Creek Film. You can find Pete there at Pete Wright. So what did you think about Hannibal Rising? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
All right. You went for the fans, right?
I wanted to know, there are, over on Letterboxd, 172 people are fans, meaning they have it in their top 4 list, yeah.
All right. So go ahead. Tell me what the fans say.
I've got 2. One is a strange one. In Spanish, translation, Hannibal Lecter is my son. He came out of my womb, spent 9 months in my belly, and I gave birth to him. Brian Fuller can attest to this. He was the doctor who delivered him.
That's weird because it seems like some of those things are out of order.
It does. Well, maybe that's part of the problem with Hannibal.
That's part of the problem with the movie.
Yeah. The other one, though, that I wanted to go to is Annie, another 5-star, which I appreciate this one. This is not good movie, but I think about it at least 3 times a day. Best experienced when delirious from fever and only barely conscious.
That's real good. Okay, so I made a comment about that they made him a superhero.
Correct.
And so I have a review that addresses exactly that. And I think it's an astute review. It's a 2.5 stars from Next Reel family member Ray Delancey.
Hey.
Who says only this. Hannibal Lecter has the same origin story as Magneto. Who knew? He's dead on. So for those who get the Magneto play, I doff my hat to you because that's absolutely the thing I should have said. It's much more Magneto than,
yes,
Deadpool.
So funny. So true. Yeah.
So funny. Thanks, Letterboxd.